When you're successful, you become a target. And once they show up, the game is actually over. Well, if you got indicted, that doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty of anything. We were too big to not be on the radar screen, but too small to write a $150 million check. I was sentenced 14 years in a very violent prison, 4,000 gang members, and one hedge fund manager.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, your hosts, and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's helped raise over $500 million and help elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. So, business owners, what if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience of 76.5 million people that we call Liberty Spenders? These Americans spend $5 trillion a year, and they're motivated to buy from businesses and brands that share their values. If you want to learn more about this, you can get access to our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free.
Well, our guest today is Jeff Martinovich, and we're really pumped about this. If you're here and you're thinking, should I stick around for this one? You absolutely should. Several of you business people are going to feel your hair stick up on end when you hear about Jeff's story. And we'll start thinking, I need to be paying attention to this stuff that Jeff's talking about and how the federal government can be weaponized against absolutely anyone. So it's an absolute must listen. We're not going to have enough time to tell Jeff's dozens of unbelievable stories. And I'm not kidding. You can pick those up by reading his book, When, Not If, which I also highly recommend. Today's guest is Jeff Martinovich, advisor with Ash Business Advisory and former CEO of a billion-dollar wealth management firm. He's a Gulf War veteran and an Air Force Academy graduate. He built his company into a national leader until the 2008 crisis brought federal scrutiny. He refused 3 plea deals, fought in court. He was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Then, representing himself, he won 2 reversals, removed 2 judges, and earned an early release after just 7 years of his sentence served. His journey is now a Forbes bestseller, When, Not If, a CEO's Guide to Overcoming Adversity. Today, Jeff helps entrepreneurs and leaders avoid his mistakes and win when the unexpected hits. Jeff, we're pumped to have you on the show.
Welcome.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Kirsten. I'm very pumped to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
To use our word pumped. I haven't heard that since the, early 90s, but we give it to Kurt to bring it back.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have read your book, Jeff, and I'll say for the audience.
You and my mother. Okay, great.
Yes.
Hey, you don't get to any kind of bestseller status with just that.
Yes.
So give yourself some credit.
I'll tell you, I get a lot of business books, and I love reading and learning. Rarely do I do what I did when I was reading Jeff's. I was canceling meetings in the afternoon, trying to hear how his story ended. And it was absolutely bizarre narrative of what you experienced when the government decided to come after you and your hedge fund. There's a lot of people listening to this who think I'm not a big deal. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Fortune 500 company. I'm not speaking out politically. I'm not antagonizing the local government. I'm not in danger when it comes to the federal government. What would you say to those people? And then maybe tell a little bit about how you were feeling before this whole thing went down.
Well, thanks, Kurt. Basically, I always talk about in my speeches and book that there probably was no more naive human on the planet than I was. I've kind of turned into the cynical granddad now, a lot of people say. But it was quite a lesson because, a lot of these people watching your podcast have been winners. They've done really well. Now, I was a big fish in a small fishbowl. Okay. Right. So I wasn't anybody, super special. What people don't quite understand, and I'm trying to do this teaching around the world now about it, is when you're successful, you become a target. And I was not smart enough to understand that. But when the government decides to come after you, you know, there's a book out there, 3 Felonies a Day. Alan Dershowitz wrote the foreword for it. And it just talks about there's so many zillion statutes and laws out there, as you all know, playing in the political arena. They can do anything they want to. And so it was just a total shock to me that I'm trying to help other business owners, other entrepreneurs take care of their companies and their families, even more importantly, better than I did.
Tell the folks the uninitiated who haven't read all about this, how did this process start? One day you're running a $2 billion hedge fund. The next day you're getting an innocuous request from your regulator.
Right.
And then the rest is history. So talk about this a little bit.
Well, I'm even dumber than that. Is I volunteered to be a beta test program for the new FINRA and SEC financial firm regulatory practices, because we were all those different things. And so I actually volunteered to help. And, you know, and so it gets...
Hey, I got nothing to hide. Sure, I'll help you. I can just see that. I can see that in you, Jeff.
A lot of that comes out of narcissism and megalomaniac. Like, hey, I want to be the guy. We're like crystal clean. We've never done anything wrong. So let me help. And so, yes, during the financial crisis of 2008, that just Bernie Madoff comes out. You know, the whole world just gets turned upside down. Then we end up giving them hundreds of thousands of emails to review. Why not? Okay, we don't have anything to hide. Then they lost all those emails and then had us reproduce those. My technology bill that year was quite extensive. But yes, I view it as the black swan comes down the river. I wasn't paying attention enough to see it coming. It shows up in your reception area one day. And once they show up, the game is actually over. And that's what I didn't realize. I was so overconfident that, hey, we are great people. My people are great people. These allegations are absurd. So there's no way that could actually happen. But as you've read in the book and as you've seen throughout the government and politics lately, you know, once they show up, the game is already over.
One of the things in your book that I found so interesting was some changes that have evolved in the last couple of decades is we allow our regulators to be funded by fines that they put on the people they're regulating, which in theory you think, okay, if the government's going to be funded by a bunch of bad people who are getting fined for stuff, that's a good thing. But the unofficial result of it is it creates an incentive for these organizations to fine people who may or may not be guilty of something.
I need a paycheck.
Or can't be proven because it helps cover their costs.
And get them promoted.
I thought it was interesting. I had this mental picture as I'm reading your book of a mafia boss sitting in front of you saying, you have this beautiful hedge fund here. Wouldn't it? It would be so bad if it just kind of went away.
Right.
And just for a small admission of guilt for something that you say you didn't do and a fine of whatever the number is, this can all just disappear.
Yep.
Exactly. You know, Kurt, you know the playbook. And unfortunately, I didn't know it at the time. But you're right. Like 15 years ago, pretty much everybody in the country would say, well, if you're indicted by the federal government, you must be guilty. You know, there's no way they would do that. And of course, what's maybe the internet and the news these days is now a lot of the world understands, well, if you got indicted, that doesn't necessarily mean you're guilty of anything. So it is a very different climate today. But when I went through it, you know, the playbook is they first come to you and they want to check. And you're right. We were too big to not be on the radar screen, but too small to write a $150 million check to the regulators like all the Wall Street firms did. and if you don't play ball, and again, I had a duty, honor, country kind of moment, very existential, where, I come from the Air Force Academy, not to be too hokey about that. But, I wasn't going to stand up there and lie and say that my people did this when I know they didn't. I wasn't going to do that in front of my own son. And, he was going off to college. So, if you have small kids, you can't stand up to the world. You'll never see them grow up. But, they come for the money. Then when that doesn't work and I refuse 3 plea offers, even down to kind of a slap on the wrist, just out of principle, I'm not recommending that for anyone else. But, to me, it was important. I don't believe you come down to the planet to make $100 million, retire, and go fishing. I think it's all a journey that God sends us down here for. But if you don't play ball, then they destroy you. And right. I mean, they're really good at that personally and your business. And that was always my problem. Like, if you want to kill me, but don't destroy the golden goose that creates millions and millions and millions of dollars for all these employees, these clients, these charities that we supported. And then, once they destroy you, then you can't really defend yourself too well. And then it's all about winning. We live in an adversarial criminal justice system versus very different in a lot of other European countries, where the goal is not to seek the truth. The goal is to win. And as you've become more and more aware, there are no checks and balances on prosecutors and judges. And so they win. And they win 98.5% of the time. And then once they win, then if you oppose them, it's all about punishment. I was sentenced 14 years in a very violent prison in New Jersey, 4,000 gang members and 1 hedge fund manager were there. And then even once I reversed the decisions and removed 2 of the judges for what, then they never let you actually win. It's about just long-term punishment, because that then stops anyone else on the planet from actually standing up for themselves. If everyone goes out and reads Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and Reardon Meadows stands up in the courtroom and defends what's right, then that'll bring the whole system to a complete stop. So they have to threaten everybody, have what they call a trial penalty, meaning you get 3 or 4 times more time if you stand up for yourself. And so everybody takes a plea, succumbs to the government, pays a huge fine, and tries to save their life. FINRA is a regulatory body. It's quasi-government kind of body, but it for financial service firms like the SEC. And yes, as I educated myself, I see that the CEO of this government body makes over $2 million a year. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty good gig. No wonder they have to keep terrorizing everybody to get payments off. But
wow.
Yes, and also in the Bureau of Prisons, when they release people to home confinement, they do everything they can to get them violated, go back to prison, because that supports the $90 billion, criminal justice budget more. So it's less expensive for the taxpayers to have people on home confinement and supervised release. And it's 1,000 times more productive and wins. Mm-hmm. But they want you in prison because that's the budget. So we always call that body back on budget.
Wow. So all the way through the system, I'm curious, what was the last bribe offer?
Yeah. Gosh, that's a great question. I should go back and research those. But, it was really, it was just so disgusting of a process, not to be too dramatic. But, they, of course, got to take their pound of flesh out of you. I could have gone away for like 12 months, paid $2.4 million is the restitution. So they claim that we made $140,000 more in fees from the pricing of one stock, which was 0.2% of our business. Wasn't even on the radar screen.
Wait, just a minute here. The crime
yes.
that they claimed is that you made how much more?
$140,000 more than we should have in a period when our fees coming in were about $8 or $9 million. So
yeah. Now, I actually knew that, but I need everyone to hear that.
It was just so bizarre to me.
Yes, they had the fine and you served time. I mean, this is the part that's just unbelievable to me, away from family, and that's incredible. And it's interesting because even in the introduction, I thought, well, are people thinking, oh, let me feel bad for the hedge fund? You know, like, I don't know if you've gotten that, right? Where because of people's thought, it's like, I'm not going to feel bad for this guy.
Well, like, that's why I went to trial. And I said, there is no way anybody in the jury would believe. But it's, as you've learned, it's just so, they put up every day in the courtroom, there's these big screens. And you never see, right? You never see federal courts, videos of what goes on or recordings, because it's all secret. And then you learn, here's why it's so secret. If everybody saw how bizarre this is, they would believe. But every day they would put up pictures of my automobiles and my beach houses and my home for a jury of very honorable, hardworking shipyard workers, nurses, a Baptist minister. But I was still so naive that I thought if I explained stock accounting and I had our CPAs validate everything we did, and I had the auditors and the valuation experts pound on the table and say everything was correct. But again, in a trial by the federal government, it doesn't matter.
If you're listening to this show, it's probably because you understand something most people don't. Marketing to Liberty Spenders isn't just about ads or tactics, it's about trust. And in the real world, trust moves through relationships. And that's why private introductions and deal flow are such a core part of what we do.
So FastPass is a private introduction and deal flow network for Christian and conservative leaders who already have influence and want to scale fast. It's not open networking, it's intentional introductions between people who already share alignment. We've seen one client land a $25,000 opportunity from a single introduction. Another told us that FastPass has become his largest source of referrals, not because of volume, but because of fit. And yet another closed her equity round at a key moment just due to the right introduction.
When you book a one-to-one consult with us, we're not handing you a list or making big promises. Instead, we're having a real conversation about what you're building, who you want to meet, and whether FastPass makes sense for this season for you. So no pressure, no hustle, and no awkward pitch from us.
Yeah. If you're ready to grow through relationships instead of forcing everything on your own, head to libertyspenders.com/FastPass and book a one-to-one consult with us.
In worst case, you leave with clarity. Best case, the right introductions change the trajectory of what you're building.
Okay, back to the episode.
I want to talk about what happens before the trial. You mentioned it as step 2 in the government playbook. So you get your mafia, like, I'd hate to see your business go away. And then the second thing they do is they make good on that. They've proven nothing. There's been no trial. And they're publicly announcing, well, look at what Jeff has done. Look at what this business has done. 60 counts or some silly, press
almost
release.
As many as Trump.
Yeah.
And so they're publicly shaming your business, which is part of the strategy, right? You're in a business of confidence. I'm giving you my money to invest for me. Mm-hmm. And now the federal government's announcing you're under indictment for X, Y, Z. And even if I like you,
that's the playbook.
I'm not sure if I want to do business with you anymore. I like you, Jeff. Maybe I don't believe it, but you're going down, right?
Of course.
And so they're doing this intentionally, in my opinion, because it has a net effect of marginalizing you. You're all alone.
Yeah.
You can't afford to pay your own defense because they've just bankrupted your company.
Right.
Right. and it gives them a distinct advantage in court.
That's how they do it. They win by never firing a shot, by never letting you defend yourself, by just alleging things. And certainly after 2008, everybody's 401k plan is down 50% or something. So everybody's in panic mode. So you're exactly right, Kurt. That is how they do that. They destroy you. And, this is in the financial world, but, the EPA releases that this car wash was not properly disposing of its chemicals. Boom. They destroy them right out of the gate. And so, that's how they win without ever having to do anything.
So you have kind of step 2, and then step 3, you go to trial. Now, one of the most shocking things about my book, I have never to date, but I know now it's not if, but when, right? I've never to date
right.
sat in a courtroom, on trial. So my perception of this is what I see on Law and Order, right? So what I see on Law and Order are zealous prosecutors, who are trying to do good and right, and put the bad guys in jail and protect the good guys. And I see defense attorneys that are not afraid to stand up for truth, justice, in the American way.
Right.
And what I learned from you, probably one of the most shocking stories in your book, is how your defense attorney behaved during this process. And there's a disincentive for him to fight your corner, because he's going to be in front of the judge 2 weeks later for somebody else, and he's going to be trying to negotiate a deal with the prosecutor. So he can't piss him off too much fighting your corner. Right. It's going to affect all his other business. So there's a story you told about him like running out of the courtroom.
That's right. True story.
And it was so shocking what happened, but it's just such a miscarriage of justice. I'm upset about it. It wasn't even me. Talk about what that process is like once now you said, you've turned down the payola, they destroyed your business, you're stuck on your own, you think your defense attorney's there to fight for you, and he abandons you. What's the story there?
Right. And I do a lot of counseling, for lack of a better term now, for other CEOs and business owners who get into this trouble. They read the book or they see a podcast or a speech. And what I tell them is, number one, don't have there's a whole long list of things I did wrong. And one of them is, do not have a lawyer that works every day in your own home district. Because you're exactly right, Kurt. You see from our story, they will only go so far to defend you. He leaned over to me during trial and said, "Hey, I know this sounds crazy," because I said, "Why are you so friendly to these prosecutors trying to kill me?" And he said, "Oh, we all go to the Homestead and the Greenbrier resorts out here for conference weekends and holidays where the prosecutors, the judges, and the defense attorneys all go to socialize for the weekend, and the government funds these conferences. So they're all best friends." And the judge was 83 at the time, Judge Robert Dumar. And it was so bizarre of his craziness commitment to ensure that we got convicted. It's like totally not Law and Order. And you're thinking, so who called the judge and said, whatever you do, make sure there's a conviction? So all your expert witnesses are not allowed to testify. You might see Manafort and all the Trump people who, when they went to trial, they said they wouldn't let any of our witnesses testify. And then the judge controls the jury. Like the judge sits up in a black robe, 8 feet up in a very powerful position. And he 100% controls the jury. Actually, even in my case, there was a hung jury and they just couldn't agree. and he demanded they all go back after like 4 days of deliberations. They couldn't agree.
Wow.
He demanded they all come back on Monday. This is after like 5 weeks. And an hour later, they were all like, okay, you're right. He's guilty. We got to go back to our families, our lives. And I totally respect that from them. But yes, so also because the judge was so wildly outrageous, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals did this very rare long ruling about how just unfair the trial was. And they did like 14 examples of how unfair the trial was. But the defense attorney never once objected to the radical judge. So the failures were not preserved, so they could not overturn the trial. So they did this whole long, wild report saying how unfair it was. But hey, sorry, procedurally, we can't overturn it. Enjoy your 14 years on a metal buck.
That's because they couldn't prove that, like if your defense attorney had objected and then he had overruled, then they could have had something to take action on. Is that, am I following that logic? Okay.
They get all real technical. They call it plain error and things like that. But if the attorney does not at least just during a 5-week trial take 2 seconds to object to that, you can't. It's not.
You got to have something on the record.
Well,
how absurd is that?
Well, it is. It does seem odd. And it's interesting as you're describing this, because to Kurt's point, from seeing this stuff played out, and I know some people who are in this field, so I'm going to have to ask about this, but it would seem like in your head, you'd think you'd want that, right? Because then they're more able to negotiate on your behalf, right? Because there's some trust there, some rapport. But I can also see the flip side, right? Only so far. That works if you're trying to just get the best deal. But if you're trying to take it all the way and say, absolutely, under no circumstances am I guilty of anything, then you want someone who's willing to, what's the go to the mattresses or whatever the expression. You want someone who's going to be, not have anything to lose, I expect.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because as you're describing that, I'm thinking, well, you'd kind of want that because then they can negotiate and say, hey, be reasonable, or hey, I'm telling you,
Right.
But that's only if you want a deal.
Well, and the craziest story about it is he took action one day in court that was adverse to your interests and then got up and ran out the back of the courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Like before we did this resentencing and it's all crazy involved. And I'm thinking that the deal was, okay, this is a couple years later, I'll finally admit to one count of something so that I could go home that day. So the attorney trying to get you to, manipulate you to be a good pawn says, hey, I told Ashley, my wife to be, to bring your clothes to the courtroom so that you could change right after and go. And I said, okay, well, let's just do this. Otherwise, I'm never going to be able to take care of my elderly mother and be home. And he leans over to me right before the resentencing happens and goes, hey, don't take anything bad from this. But right after here, I got to run out to another event. So it doesn't mean I'm good or bad. Don't take anything bad from that. And right then, this huge fear came over my body. I'm like, oh my God, the setup is again. And I saw the judge come out and I could literally see this black aura around her. Right. And she was on a mission and she came up and it was just a barrage of what a horrible human I am. And the whole thing was a total setup. And he runs literally almost running out of the courtroom right after that. And as they're chaining and shackling me again, and Ashley runs after him and he's all the way down the stairs and there's a affidavit on the federal record for this. And she goes, Larry, what the hell happened? And he screams up, he's like, just be lucky you didn't get another 20 years, and runs out the door. That's a true story on the record.
Yes. And I'll tell you, this is this is the other part of this that, you don't appreciate if you've never been there. I would have never imagined a scenario where the guy who was on your payroll was working against your interests, right? He's not a public defender, right? I mean, you get maybe some of these guys who are, public defenders, maybe they're kind of bottom of the barrel attorneys or something. But this is a guy who was not that and was actively working against you in part almost certainly to preserve his relationships. And that's the same sort of challenge that anyone in your situation is going to face.
Right. And Kurt, sorry to interrupt you there, but while you're on that point, I want people to also know that 95% of the people get a public defender, come in, and you hope that these are great people. But they're forget the term, but they're private attorneys that come in for the court. And unfortunately, they meet their inmate like 20 minutes before they go to sentencing. And they come in, they go, hey, I've talked to the prosecutor, da, 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 da. And they, but the person's like, no, I didn't do that, or that's all like, right, not right. And and I know these attorneys now, of course, because in my business world, they get paid $15,000 from the court to show up for those 20 minutes and send this guy off to prison. So, I mean, I at least had, much more time than that, but it's so sad. When I worked in the prison law library trying to help 300 other inmates, I just was in shock that that's how the system really works.
Well, and then the final blow is, arguably they could have said, well, we got this guy. He's sentenced to prison. Let's move on to catching some hardened criminal. Only to find out that was the beginning of yet another fight in your life. First, by putting you not into what we imagine. Of course, I imagine, Bernie Madoff and his clan go to some sort of cushy white collar prison. He's probably gardening. Yeah. But they sent you to Fort Dix.
And there's much worse places too, but Fort Dix was 4,000, many gang members. It was quite an unbelievable experience. I'm incredibly fortunate to be all in one piece here today. It was just an unbelievable experience. When I was filing all these wild motions with a number 2 pencil and a manual typewriter for 300 other guys, and then teaching myself federal criminal law, I was able to file like 50 or 60 FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Acts. And after being in Fort Dix for like 4.5 years, I one day received a package that had all these documents in it from the FOIA department, and they were marked FOIA exempt, this real big stamp, which means do not release these documents.
Right.
It was one of the 100 things in the universe of where God intervened and the universe saved me. And I can't explain these things, but that was one of them where some clerk either made a mistake and sent me those, or maybe I like to think maybe thought we should have those. I don't know. Yeah. And it said, I had requested the communications from the Norfolk, Virginia prosecutor's office to the Bureau of Prisons in Fort Dix. And what it showed is I was supposed to be at a minimum security camp, but because I kept fighting my case and I wouldn't lie prostrate to the federal government, they said they kept ordering the BOP to not move me to a safer institution.
Wow.
And I, 2 days later, I filed a federal suit in the Trenton, New Jersey federal court myself.
Yeah.
And 6 days later, I was moved to a minimum security place, much more safe, much more ability to work on my case. So that was just another miracle in the story.
But, it wasn't over, because then COVID hits. And in Virginia, or wherever you're at, maybe Jersey, right? Where I
was in West Virginia at that time.
You're in West Virginia. So they during COVID, they think, well, to thin out the prisons, we're going to grant certain people the ability to leave and do home detention, right?
Home confinement, yes.
Home confinement. So you're there at home confinement with ankle monitor and all that typical stuff, which malfunctions one night.
I know, yes.
Right. And so they tried to accuse you of breaking out of prison and put you back in.
It's actually called escape. And it's the worst violation you can have. You're right. The phone system went down. You have to have a landline. It's through our cable. The cable went down, and their monitor on my ankles malfunctioning. But they had a record. What we finally found out is they had a record. The monitoring system was working. They see that I'm sleeping in my bed all night, but it was an opportunity to say I escaped, and the marshals show up at the door. Ashley is 6 months pregnant with our miracle baby, little Carly. And they yanked me back to prison for 7 years.
Yeah.
I swear that's true. I swear it's true.
I have no words.
What happened was my Air Force Academy alumni brothers, who we've been through hell and back together, rallied everybody on the planet to come save me. In those 4 or 5 weeks, they transferred me to 5 different prisons across the country. You'll hear people call that diesel therapy. And the reason that is because your paperwork doesn't catch up and you can't prove anything. But if it wasn't for these incredible friends of mine who held Ashley's hand every single day, they finally convinced the BOP that, and also the magazine, the Libertarian magazine, did a national article and said, this man missed a phone call. So they sent him back to prison for 7 years. But they finally, then my 4th or 5th stop is in Jackson, Mississippi. I'm in a van with 2 drivers. They pull up to the penitentiary in Jackson, and I'm screaming in the back of the van, oh my God, this is a mistake. It's all wrong. Because I'm thinking they're going to finally kill me and I'll never be heard from again in here. We pull into the gate. There's these guys with these AR-15s, surrounding the van for this dangerous hedge fund manager. They take me inside, and the guy hands me some jeans and a white T-shirt, unshackles all my shackles, and gives me a airline flight back home from Jackson, Mississippi. They drive me to the international airport there. They drop me off on the front curb. I have no money, no phone, no ID, no nothing. And I thought, geez, a couple hours ago, I was the most dangerous convict in the United States. Now I'm left alone at an international airport. I go up to the Delta lady and I'm like, I'm really embarrassed to tell you this, but they just released me from prison and here's my ticket and I don't have any ID. Can I go home? And that's how I made it back.
Wow.
Well, it's the whole story of what you tell is so essential, right? And I think what you're talking about in your book about this is something everybody needs to be prepared for. Because one day the federal government's going to come for their pound of flesh, and you can't be naive like you were naive.
Right.
So
I was so naive.
I'm hearing this story for the umpteenth time because I've read your book. You and I have talked. I've heard you share it other places, watch videos. Even now, there's that hair on the back of it thinking, okay, I believe it. So if you had it all over again, or if you have advice for somebody, so if maybe they're not on the radar yet, or they don't think anything's coming, what should I be doing today to be ready or prepared? What would you do if you were me?
Yeah, great point. In my talks around the country, that's, really what I try to focus on for these business leader groups. One is asset protection. Okay. I'm so dumb that I was a guy taking care of billions of dollars and 3,000 people and advising them all the things to do. And I never got around to doing all the things for myself, which I'm so embarrassed about. And I'm so guilty about that for my own family. But, sophisticated asset protection, we had 7 or 8 companies. They should have all been disjointed and covered and things. When you start a business from scratch, I started the $1 billion company on a credit card. You personally guarantee everything, of course, you do it, but eventually you're big enough, you can take care of that. And so I should have decoupled my family, myself, my shareholders, my stakeholders, all these things. And I never really did it. And, lawyers don't tell you to do it. Accountants don't tell you to do it. They're just busy doing their own thing. So that's a big thing. Secondly, overconfidence is something I talk about a lot. Like, no way this can happen to me, and when I give these speeches, I could see these CEOs, like I can literally see their eyeballs, like, holy. Right. And, I got to call everybody on Tuesday to start fixing all these things. So it's really knowledge and it's preparation and it's protection. Another thing is I would have kept a lot more of my powder dry. We grew 36% per year average for 18 years.
Wow.
Which I can't believe, and it wasn't because of me. It was because I surrounded myself with some brilliant people. So what I would always do is take any extra money that I had and I'd reinvest it in the firm, right? Why wouldn't you? Stock market averages 10% a year over time. And in reality, like we talked about at the beginning, Kurt, if I had $100 million of cash, I could have written a check to FINRA and made them go away. And then we could have all lived to make it again. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those are just some easy, fundamental things that I would do tomorrow. And I am helping many people do that right now.
And that's why I love and just appreciate you writing the book, because it's not enough to just tell your story and shock people. But I know in there, hey, here's a list. Here are some things you need to do. So people go out right now
lessons
and go get that book.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One of the lessons I thought was interesting, and because of our experience in politics and public relations, I see this happen all the time. You allow your public defense to be run by your lawyer, which is almost always a mistake, because your lawyer is going to tell you, keep quiet. Don't say anything public. Don't say anything that might come up in trial.
And so, right. Don't answer.
But then there's the PR.
And so while FINRA was out there destroying your reputation, you're sitting quiet in the corner, not defending yourself. And that was one of the things you talked about. And I thought, I want to reiterate that because I see it so often. And you've got to understand that part of the playbook for these guys is to destroy your reputation, and you've got to fight it like tooth and nail.
Kurt, that's such a great point. What I would first say is, if the feds show up in your reception area, call the Prosper Group and Liberty Spenders immediately. I mean, I truly believe
we have some comms professionals who can help.
You do.
Yes.
I know. And I know some of them now. And boy, they're incredible. Lindsay is amazing. And so that is a huge mistake I made, because you're right. The attorneys say, don't answer the reporters, don't do anything. And so this train gets out of the station. And and next thing I knew, I was, in the newspaper 35, 36 times. One day I'm driving my son to school. He's like junior in high school. We stop at 7-Eleven to get him some snacks. And he comes out of 7-Eleven with the Newport News Daily Press. My ugly picture is on the top fold and bottom fold of the whole paper. He comes into the car and I'm like, oh my God, my guilt and my shame is skyrocketing. Like, what am I doing to this great kid? And he says to me, hey, Dad, if you're going to be on the front page of the newspaper every day, you really should send them a better picture. And we laughed about it, and I was so relieved. He did so great with it all. But yes, they get out of the train. Everybody believes it, except your circle of close friends. And the worst thing I did was remaining silent. I should have called Kurt and Kristen and said, look, in the next 2 hours, I need you rocking and rolling to tell the true story. Because otherwise people don't get any other story. So it's unfair to think they wouldn't think that that's right.
Yeah. Well, and I would tell people any whiff of it, get people going, because it's difficult to tell the truth in 2 hours, right? To show up and say, hey, it's nice to meet you, Jeff. Now let's get all the facts and create your statements. In fact, I would encourage people to know who they're going to call long before they have a problem.
Yeah, you got to have like a red book in your vault.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to, before we get into our final kind of lightning round, I wanted to talk about something serious. You talk about it a little bit in your book, right? But you're talking about what's longer than a 14-year ordeal, because you have the trial, which takes time. And then you have your time in prison. You're still, dealing with some of the aftermath of it. How did you wake up every morning with this hanging over your head? How did you endure those moments in prison with some pretty tough folks and keep your head up, keep fighting, and keep resilient during the entire time?
I did 3 things. And I believe, first of all, we as humans need to every day take on as many challenges, things that scare us, overcome fear, discipline. And I was very fortunate through sports, the military, it's entrepreneurialism, nothing's harsher than that, is to, build a lot of grit. I think, for lack of a better term, you hear that today. So first of all, I try to teach everybody else, do all that today so that you got a playbook, you got a battle plan, and you're strong enough. Because yes, unfortunately, 98% of people curl up on a metal bunk for 14 years and, they die, literally, in my mind. So I did 3 things. Every day I said, I'm going to get 1% better physically. Okay. And so I was either in the gym every night after the law library or running that dirt track and screaming out to the world. Everybody thought I was psycho, but that kind of helps you in prison. People stay away from you. And so, but it was, of course, you got to be physically strong there to survive. But even more so, it's the endorphins and the serotonin that gives you the ability to bounce out of bed the next morning and tackle the world, trench warfare. Number 2, I made a commitment to get intellectually smarter 1% every day. So, of course, I'm spending the whole day in the law library teaching myself federal criminal law, which actually I found out isn't that difficult. It's a big template of silliness. But I also read 26 classic literatures, which one great thing about prison is families send a lot of books. And so the libraries are pretty good. And when you come from the schools of engineering and finance like me, I was woefully inept at classical literature. So I read, my favorite, of course, was Count of Monte Cristo. So I made that. And then I made a commitment to 1% a day, get closer to God, closer to the universe. Of course, read the Bible front to back so many times. You have a lot of time. And I even did meditation and Siddha yoga and all these type of things. And number 3, I made a commitment every day to get 1% better, stronger spiritually. And again, for a lot of us, that means many different things. But for me, it was, I read the Bible. You can get Bibles in prison. Those are pretty good. You can have access to those. And I read that, I can't tell you how many times, front to back. And I also did meditation and Siddha yoga, spiritual training. I did everything I could because I knew that, when you go through great adversity, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And, most of us, we can lock it together and be great for a sprint, but marathons are hard. And you have to get up every day and be strong. And if you don't believe that there's something out there helping you, in my world, it is God and Jesus helping me. And I believe that they're there. And I talk to them 4 times a day while I was in prison. And I should do more even when I'm released. And that is what gives you the strength, because you have to believe at some point you're going to win. At some point you're going to survive. I love how Joel Osteen says, you don't necessarily have to win. Sometimes you just have to outlast them. And that really resonated with me. And so those 3 things, physical, intellectual, and spiritual, I know that if I did those every single day, I was going to make it. And thank God I did.
It's interesting because I knew that Kurt, he was so passionate after reading your book. I knew he would want to drive this interview. And I was so glad he asked that question because, we want to leave people with some hope and a reminder that even when things seem stacked against us or when we're being treated unfairly or, again, since we're on a spiritual note, being taken through a trial. I think anyone listening or watching, even if they're thinking this story is insane and I find no part of this that I can relate to, what you can relate to is some sort of trial and adversity that you just felt like you could not see past and you did not know your way out of. And I just think what you've shared is so wise because when you don't know what to do, and even when you think you do, by the way, the answer is to not lean on your own understanding,
right?
But turn to God, right?
Right.
For He is the ultimate comfort, and He does not ever promise us to have a life without challenge or adversity. He only promises to be with us.
You're right. I think you're right. And
right.
Kristen, I want to.
We'd all prefer it, or we think that
it would be easier, but then we'd be soft. So I do want to leave everybody with the miracles of my life. And I want them to not be like, oh my God, you got to hang it up if this happens to you. But let me tell you real quickly, about 1.5 years after I was in prison, I'm destroyed. Everything's just gone. It's just unbelievable. I get a love letter. And Ashley sends me a love letter. She worked in one of our companies, and after she graduated from Old Dominion University down here, she sends me a love letter, like just out of the blue. I knew her. We were great friends. She was in the company. She came to my trial many days to try to support me. And it said, hey, my friends told me that if I never tell you, I'll regret it, that I love you. And I always have. I've never told you. And I'm going to stick with you through this horrific challenge. And I know the world has abandoned you. And she came to visit me in New Jersey. She drove 7 hours each way to do 2 or 3 hours in this horrific prison visiting rooms. It's so terrible, I can't even begin to describe it. Just to sit with me once a month and tell me she is there for me. And then 7 years later, she shows up at the front gates of the prison. I kind of related to the Blues Brothers movie where Jake and Elliot, and they're picking him up at Joliet Prison in Chicago. She picked me up. I actually started freaking out 1 minute after we left. And I said, I left my coffee mug on the curb. We've got to go back and get it. She was screaming at me like, are you insane? And I said, yes.
This is my one belonging.
Clearly I am. But it literally, after having billions of dollars, it was the one belonging I owned in the universe. And she turned the car around and went back and got my coffee mug and then said, you really are crazy. So I know that. But yes, we came home. We talked about it. We now have this beautiful little girl, Carly, who just turned 4 years old. I'm 59 years old. So I have to be strong for the next 20 years. It's like a forced plan. I have no choice. My son, Cole, works with us every day. He's 32. And in all of these previous business associates and great friends from the Air Force Academy and everywhere else had just come out of the woodwork and surrounded me and put their arms around me the day I got home. That was 5 years ago. And so now our business is crazy thriving. I work with the best people on the planet. And so pretty much it's really true. I wake up every day. I can't believe it. It is God, the universe, friends, family have just created this unbelievable life I have now. So of course I always think like, would I have this incredible life if I didn't go through this horrific trauma? I don't know. Probably not. So Kurt and Kristen, I want to just stress that people have to keep putting one foot in front of the other every day on these things, do all these positive, proactive things, because it will get better and they will get through it. And all I know is I have all these real life stories, and we didn't bore everybody with the 400 other insane ones today, but I want to give other people hope that if you just keep crushing it every day, it can turn you don't just survive, but you can crazy thrive. Me being aligned with Liberty Spenders and the Prosper Group is just one example of a miracle that I years ago could have never imagined. So I want to make sure everybody understands that.
Well, I think that's beautiful. And I think what's cool is the level of purpose that you have and what you're doing now to share the story, which, yes, can be scary, but to equip people and then always leaving them with hope at the end. Because no matter what, we pray that none of us experience anything like what you've just described. But we all need reminders of how other people have overcome tremendous adversity, things that we could never have experienced.
Correct.
And I think your story is very inspiring because of how you persisted and then what you've been able to do on the other side and the beautiful perspective that you have, Jeff. But with that, let us turn before both of us start, getting weepy here. Let us turn to our lightning round. We ask every guest the same 3 questions to wrap up our show. The first being, and I think, we've heard so much about what you've been through, but, when you look back on your life and you're lying in bed, not just 20 years, we need like 50, 60, right? We're going to live a long time here.
Yeah, we are.
And you're looking back on that. How are you determining, right, your legacy or that you've had a life well lived?
I think I used to always tell my rookie stockbrokers, hey, if you want to save the world, if you have $100 million, it makes it a lot easier. So I do want to create great wealth again, only because if wealth in the right hands, I think can do incredible things in our country, in the world, of course. So I do want to do that. But more importantly, as we just kind of talked about, I want, when finally I have my tombstone, I want people to say like, damn, that's a good story. and that was inspiring and it gives me hope. And I've always kind of said this forever is when I go up on my final day, I want God to, when he's doing my life review movie, I want him to say like, man, that's a great story. Good job. So I think that's why we come down to the planet is to do these incredible things, not to be comfortable, not to take the easy road, not to take the easy path. So I hope a lot of other people, and again, there's so many people that I get inspired by daily. I want to be one of those people that helps everybody else.
And then 90 seconds on something that's taken you down the rabbit hole recently. So something off topic. It could be a good book, a hobby. What's just captured your attention? Maybe it's a new show you've been watching.
Yeah.
But let's peek into the mind of Jeff and tell us what's captured your imagination recently.
You know what I would say is because I have little Carly, like I just talked about, I've gotten crazy into the trying to be healthy. With Tony Robbins has a company, mylifeforce.com. I'll give him a good plug there. So, I need to be strong for Carly and Ashley and Cole and, 80's the new 40, maybe something like that. So I choke down these 19 supplements a night and I take that Samorlin peptide shot. And so I've been doing that for about 6 months. I think it's working, trying to do these 40 different things to make your sleep better. So that's kind of my little hack going on right now outside of our 19 companies we have in our portfolio right now. So I want to just be as healthy as possible so that I can see the rewards of taking care of the people I want to take care of.
Okay. 90 seconds. If people haven't heard anything this whole episode, which boy, would that be a shame. And they're just coming now, give us your best plug for the book and for also your advisory, what you're doing now, who should reach out to you and why?
Thank you so much for that. That's awfully kind of you. Ash Business Advisory is really an incubator, accelerator, all these incredible opportunities that come to us. It's a team of Air Force Academy graduates, 5 or 6 of us that we graduated 100 years ago. They've been wildly successful. And what we do is we take an equity stake in companies, we raise capital, we bring in a bench team of executives, We have a small venture capital fund. We have a law firm here headquartered in Norfolk, Virginia. We just try to make all these companies better, more valuable, more cash flowing for them. I view it as really, just like I was in the prison law library helping these other people with their lives. I kind of view it the same thing. They say that I play the role of CEO behind the green curtain. But we just want to help all these people. And it comes back to us 100 times over. We've had a couple nice exits over the last year, which make me feel better about the 7 other companies I'm pulling my remaining hair out on a daily basis. But that's what we do. It's a group of veterans, athletes, people who have been entrepreneurs. We jump in the boat with the company. We're not trust fund babies. We're not Ivy Leaguers. We're not passive investors. We're extremely different. So we've done a lot of turnarounds. It's a hell of a lot of work, but it's very rewarding. And I just love to help. I was at a football game at an Air Force football game a couple weeks ago, and one of the CEOs came up and gave me a big hug and said, "Thank you for saving his life." And I know, as crazy as that sounds, but that's where the reward comes in. So that's what we do. And we've been really fortunate.
It's not crazy, Jeff.
And we just want to help more people.
Yeah. Well, and I love that because your interests are aligned, and so one of the beautiful things about that is, right, you benefit when everybody succeeds. And so you're in there. You're in there with just as much stake as the next guy. So that's wonderful. And you didn't plug your book, but we will. So when, not if, go and get that and check out and help this amazing, amazing gentleman. So, Jeff, we just want to thank you so much for your time and for, sharing the story and being kind as Kurt is like ripping his hair out. Like, you cannot believe this.
I should have never let Kurt read that book.
I tell you, he tells everybody he's a great commercial when he finds something that he's passionate about. He tells the world.
And Kristen, I do want to reverse the plug there, because Liberty Spenders and Prosper Group is such an unbelievable organization, which is, just as you said, very aligned, doing great work in doing good. And I think with 99% of the real people in the country, it aligns perfectly. And so I just want to say that for anybody else who has an opportunity to work with you all, it has been one of the great blessings of my business and my personal self. And so I hope you guys just keep rocking it like you are.
That's so sweet. That's very kind, Jeff. And yes, we are thrilled to be doing it. So listen, this has been great. People that want to get in touch with Jeff, there's a lot of places to do it. But yes, number one, go to jeffmartinovich.com and you can look more. And he's on all the social media platforms. So follow him. He's got a great kind of newsletter. And again, the book is so fantastic. When, not if. And then for those of you joining, we appreciate so much of your time. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss anything moving forward. And we just appreciate your time. Until next time.